Hey everybody, you're listening to and possibly watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy heavy helmets that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy heavy helmet to listen in or possibly stream in. Now you'll see that we have 4 squares here tonight. You'll see the gentleman, which for me is on the lower right corner. I'm not sure if that's the case for everybody. And that's our good friend Steve Bryant. So I'm going to throw some names out.
Oh, wait, I should look this way. Hi, Bill.
Okay.
I'm trying to do a Brady Bunch thing. Sorry.
Joey Bishop, Regis Philbin, Al Roker, and Billy Crystal. Now, those were the guests that appeared the most times, respectively, on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, David Letterman, Conan O'Brien, and then the late night, and then the Tonight Show, whatever the late fucking 10 o'clock thing was with Jay Leno. So Steve Bryant's our own version of that. He's appeared the most times on our podcast, and we're thrilled to have him back.
Yep. So It's kind of like Tom Hanks with the Three Timers Club or Five Timers Club.
Five Timers, yeah.
Do I get my?
We don't have a green jacket to give you though. Sorry.
I'm wondering who the first 5 timer was. Was it Elliot Gould or Steve Martin?
Might have been Steve Martin.
Yeah,
Steve Martin. Yeah, because he wasn't on. He wasn't part of the main cast.
No.
The original SNL for very long, but then he hosted. At least once a year afterwards. So
yeah,
he was on like every other week when I was in junior high. It just felt like it that.
Yeah.
It's funny. We were talking right before the show started about how Steve had been on so much. He was kind of an honorary 4th chair, and that was before Bill had joined us. So that's just thematically, it just links up in a really, really neat
Bill
way.
just got here.
He just rolled in and was like, Bill just knows things. Like I swear to God, Bill has got all of our homes like wiretaps sometimes.
A little bit.
The cameras.
No, drones, baby, drones. Little
he sees what I do in the privacy of my home
with good karma. Yeah, and it's summer. And Steve, I know you were I assume you were in the path of what was left of Beryl. Was everything okay?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really get it very, very bad. It's just been really hot. So I mean, it's not like Texas or whatever where they're really getting slammed. I'm trying to remember to look at the camera instead of looking at the screen because I look shifty when I look down here. So I'm looking up here.
You might even call the weather unbearable. Okay.
Wow.
Got that out of the way. It's been hot, man, here. It's been so hot.
Yeah, it's nasty here too.
It's been feeling like Arkansas down here.
I was going to say, it's been a comfortable 95 with a breeze here today. and that's a break from the weather. But so like I said, I'm in Arkansas, so we caught a little bit of the Barrow tail end of stuff, but not anything unbearable.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah.
All right. Well, with the nutty state of our nation and the nutty state of climate, we're going to put all that aside and talk some comic books. And Steve is here to talk about his latest Kickstarter, which is a project called Undead or Alive. And unlike some of your more recent Kickstarters, this is for a graphic novel. This isn't for individual issues. You want to tell us all about that then?
Yeah. So, part of it just comes down to my partner hates it when I do Kickstarters. And so I don't want her to be mad at me. So I can't serialize everything that I'm working on because we would have something coming out like every month, and B, as a reader, I understand the need to serialize Kickstarter stuff because everybody's got to get paid, but I'm at the point where I'm mostly working with old friends who have other gigs and they don't need the Kickstarter to support them as much as they're doing it for fun. So this was kind of a chance to just do it as an OGN instead of a serialized thing. And I like books, obviously. And this is going to sound so corny, and I apologize in advance, but I really like trying to make beautiful objects. And there's something about having the control print wise of knowing that I'm going in and I know I'm going to go with heavier paper. I'm going to go with a heavier cover stock. And, if we hit X number of stretch goals, I get to put, French flaps on the cover. I like all these book nerd things. So just cutting to the chase and making the collection that I want right off the bat is really, really appealing to me. Again, book nerd.
And in terms of the content, go ahead, Caleb. Go.
I was going to say, but I mean, look, consider who you're talking to, though. So I mean, out of everybody, all of us understand that book nerd aspect, and it doesn't sound corny to say that you like producing beautiful things. All of us still collect physical books in a digital world, right? Like we like that. We like the ephemera. We like the beautiful things. So that doesn't sound corny. And as I've said on the show many, many times, I get the French flap aspect. I'm a whore for Zipatone. You give me a spot varnish on the cover, then I will go just under the table. Like, what do you want? So like, I love that. I love that aspect though, because it means like when creators like you and people who care about not only the creation of the comic, right, of the medium, but you also care about the physicality and the production aspect of it. You get something neat. Like you care about the quality of the paper, right? You care about what the front looks like. You care about those kind of things. And I feel like if you don't care about those, and you're producing a product that is stock, and that's not what you're here to do. You're here to create like something that stands out, something beautiful, and not something stock. So I'm an art nerd, so I salute you for those kind of things, just because you do care about them, and it shows. It shines through, and that's what separates you from some other folks who might not, who don't get that.
Well, and I mean that's kind of the luxury of being able to do this on Kickstarter and being an individual rather than a publisher. A publisher has to make sure that they can pay salaries. And I hope that they're contributing to a 401k for their employees. And I hope they have good, health insurance for their employees and all these other things. So they've got to be conscious of that bottom line. Me, I'm just an idiot that's making comics in my downtime. And I can try to, pursue that beautiful book thing. But the other part of it is, and this is going to sound like name dropping, and I don't mean it to, but at Heroes Con, I had dinner with a bunch of other creators, and Ron Randall was one of them. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about his Trekker books, and we were all exchanging printer information. And Ron was so concerned, well, I don't think I can switch printers because I don't know if I'll get the same soft touch cover that I get, currently for Trekker. And I just loved the fact that, he's one of us. He cares about the quality of the book over saving 10 cents or 20 cents or however much. And it's, I don't know. It's really exciting to me to, have kind of found my tribe that way in terms of creators. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I went way afield. I'll shut up.
Oh, no
way. It's good that, you guys started talking about this, because this is one of the things that I've been consistently excited to, when it comes to Kickstarters that you're, that you're putting out there. I get excited at what kind of options I have for covers. And I was talking about this, I think, when we saw you at Heroes Con, that I'm kind of kicking myself. I didn't go back for the, for that metal finish cover that really, I mean, the whole, like everything that you provide is great, but the printing quality, like the, what you're putting out there, aside from a great story, great art, great writing, just really fun comic, you're also putting out something that is really, I'd say, would compete with pretty much anything out there on the newsstand. Well, newsstands out there at direct market store or special order or anything like that. I think it's just really great, and that's why I'm really excited that you're putting out a graphic novel as well with Undead or Alive, because that. Again, it gets you like a lot of Steve Bryant one shot, which is a lot of fun. And like I kind of you know, put up ahead when you were talking about like quality that you're putting out and everything. I was able to finally pick up the Athena Voltaire compendium from you last month at Heroes, and like I'd say all but one of these stories I had not read before. I had not seen before. I kind of missed, the boat on some of them before. And just like the way that it's put together in this, excellent. But I just say, it's a lot of fun to read your stuff and to be able to hold it in hand, because it's quality. So gush, swoon.
Compliments. So thank you.
we want to turn you beet red in just like compliment embarrassment. So there you go.
Then I'll start unselling people on the books. I'll be like, no, you don't really want this.
Well, and just you actually did provide us a whole bunch of images, and they are ready to share. So whenever you want me to go ahead and throw them up on screen, we can definitely do that when you want to talk about what's in the book and how you have it all set up. But I'll shut up and let the other guys.
Well, I was just going to say, just to transition into what the actual content is. The action takes place in the swamps of Gerber's Crossing, and if you're at any way familiar with 70s horror, that immediately has some connotation. So, Steve, why don't you just give us the the elevator pitch, Reader's Digest version of what we'll be seeing in Undead or Alive?
So, as an overall series, Undead or Alive is a love letter to 70s and 80s monster comics. Not really horror, but monsters. And I feel like there's an important distinction between those two things. But the first story arc plays around with a lot of the tropes of swamp monster comics from that period, and it also references older ones like the Heap and stuff like that. But obviously there's a ton of Steve Gerber with Man-Thing, and Alan Moore and Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson with Swamp Thing in there. Working on the book, it was a bit of a different kind of setup for me, because usually I start from a point of characters, and I know the character beats I want them to go through on their arcs, and I add the adventure aspects afterwards. But this one just started off as this puzzle box of me trying to be clever with referencing all these older swamp comics, and the characters kind of came later. But I feel like the characters, it's still character driven, but it was I really like the craft of trying to examine like different formats for writing and for drawing, and so this was kind of a fun experiment to work essentially in reverse and build this puzzle box and develop it from there. So I've strayed from the elevator pitch. Monster comics, love letter to 70s and 80s Marvel and DC stuff. That's the elevator pitch. But yeah, all these other aspects of it. There's a metafiction quality to it, in terms of the way that the horror manifests itself and the way that the horror is dispatched. And also just from a point of view of anagrams out the wazoo. The lead character, not lead character, but the mystery is following this disappearance of a British comic writer named Ariel Moon, whose name happens to be an anagram, more or less. So yeah, lots of just goofy little things like that. But I feel like, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about, but I feel like I'll spoil it. So I'll shift over to the art, because I only wrote this one. I didn't draw it. My longtime collaborator, Jason Millay, who colors Athena Voltaire and Evie and the Helsings and Ghoul Scouts, drew the first chapter and colored and digitally painted the whole book. He was unable to do more than just that first chapter because his day job is doing storyboards for TV shows and films that shoot in Chicago. So like he does all the Dick Wolf shows. He did the Candyman remake that Jordan Peele produced. So yeah, he worked on a lot of that stuff. So he doesn't have time for drawing comics, but he can, paint them really quickly. So Jason did the first chapter, and then chapters 2 and 3 are drawn by Patrick McAvoy, who just did a Gorgo book that was on Zoop like last month. But yeah, Patrick he's bringing a whole Frank Brunner vibe to this. If you remember, like Brunner's Man-Thing and Howard the Duck stuff, his work really is reminiscent of that, and it's kind of cool because Jason's work has a solid Neil Adams vibe to it. So both of them are giving us like all this great retro stuff with all the cool modern painted colors on it. And I strayed from the elevator pitch just because I like to talk about my collaborators because they're awesome.
Well, talking about the art. Oh, Bill is on mute.
But just since you brought it up, I do want to ask you, when you said that there's a distinction between horror and monster books, and I'd like to hear from you what that distinction is.
Okay, now this is a purely arbitrary distinction in my head. I'm sure there are people who have actually, written entire theses about this. Theses?
Theses.
But
rhymes with feces. Yeah.
Oh,
Thesu.
lovely.
Thesaboo.
Thesaboo.
But no,
Thesaboo.
in my mind, all monster comics can fall under the category of horror, but not all horror has monsters. All rectangles, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. And so the big distinction for me is usually with a monster comic, there's a level of heroism. Either the monster is working towards redemption or something like that, or you have protagonists who are trying to stop the monster from whatever choice they have. So I just think there's always that element of heroism to it. Does that make sense?
No,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And you're talking about being inspired by Swamp Thing and Man-Thing. In those cases,
The heap.
and the
Don't forget
heap.
about the heap.
Oh, the heap comes
Don't
up
forget
in there.
The heap comes first. Yep.
Steve, I'm reading Airboy right now. I'm going back and doing a reread of Airboy, so like that's why the heap is in my brain. Sorry.
No. But I mean,
Great.
in the first chapter, there, when people are theorizing the swamp monster, you see like people coming up with different stories on how he came to be, and one of the people did say World War I ace whose plane crashed, which was the heap's backstory. Shit, man, we referenced Sludge in there.
Yes.
Oh my God, Sludge!
Yeah. So
Ultraverse Sludge.
I
God.
again, I wanted it to be kind of this playful way of looking at all these characters that have this same kind of through line. But those Airboy issues, man, the first 45 issues of that, whenever Stan Walk stopped drawing it, it kind of tapers off for me.
Yeah.
But boy, the early stuff with Truman all the way through Stan stuff, that was one of my first indie books, and God,
It's but it's number one. It's spectacular. Number
Plus,
two,
you had it every 2 weeks, which was so nice.
Really?
Yeah, it was a bi-weekly book for a long, like most of its existence, I think.
yeah, it was like a 14 or 16 page book.
Yep.
Yeah, they're small, they're short reads.
Yeah.
And good, like they're quick reads and good reads. And by the way, how great is it to like just to think about, considering what we have now and everything is done in 12-issue arcs and stuff like that. But like we just had a conversation where we said, the first like 45 issues are great. Yeah, like it's just so like it just strikes me as being so different than the publishing world that we live in now.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Well, okay, but this kind of dovetails nicely into my most recent obsession, which is I love 1970s Jack Kirby storytelling from the perspective of like, if you, Commandy is probably the best example of this, where you have an 18 to 20 page story that it's broken up into 4 chapters. Each chapter has either a splash page or a 2/3 splash page. The beginning of the book has a splash and a double page spread, and it's a complete story. It may be episodic, but that chapter is a satisfying, complete chapter.
Yeah.
And that's one of the next things I want to try to tackle from a writing point of view. I am so fascinated with the fact that you could get a complete story that way.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still telling a longer story.
Yeah. I've never thought of it that way, but every issue that he's involved in is a done in one with the overarching story, which is literally a journey.
Yeah, but I mean, even a 2-parter like when Commandy's underwater with Tila the dolphin and the Red Baron.
There's still a definitive break between the first issue and the second issue where you don't feel that you're on the edge of a cliff.
Right.
And,
it's just so well done. So anyway, I
it's
love that.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting you say that, because I was having a conversation today with one of my law clerks, and we were talking about Lone Wolf and Cub, and how obviously that is voluminous, right? But I was explaining that the first probably 3 omnibuses of that are just what you're talking about. They are a lot of done in one, like villain of the week or fight of the week stories, but there's a little bit in there that stretches over this long arc, and we don't see that anymore as much because we don't have the long arcs anymore. And so there's not that room to expand and tell these like really episodic done in one issues that have tethers to longer arcs. You either have really short stories or you have really long things. I mean, so you think about manga like One Piece. There's entire arcs that, each issue is just like one moment of time and doesn't really do a whole lot. But in what you're talking about, that Kirby work, you're doing both, right? You're telling a done in one story with a tether to an overarching theme and an overarching narrative and a very limited page count. And I find complete with, like you said, a double page spread and all of these kind of mechanical craft themes that go into that. And that not only showcases incredible and impeccable storytelling and also challenges the artist to work within that, but it also works within a limited like framework of craft, right? Like we have to do 2 things at once, which from a prose writer standpoint is just baffling. But like considering that you're writing not only for prose, but you're writing for your artist, that's a lot of that's some heavy lifting.
Well, I think Grell was doing a similar thing in Warlord from that period too. I don't think he was breaking it up chapter wise, but again, I'm really fascinated by going back and looking at a lot of the comics of my youth, like with the Kirby stuff, or just like 1980s Marvel and DC. I always call like the big 2 auteur era. Just because, that was when you had Miller on Daredevil and Byrne on the FF. And even though you had a collaborative thing with Wolfman and Perez on Titans, it still functioned essentially as a singular entity. Yes.
Yeah.
And I just, all of those books, even when they had an overarching storyline, because they were newsstand books, the Jim Shooter-ism, I guess, of every issue is someone's first issue really applied to where it had to be somewhat contained. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I'm always like I said, I'm fascinated by the form. So I want to try to investigate, playing around with that sometime too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Well,
interesting you
I
said
just
that about New Teen Titans, because that was the comic that got me back into comics. You know, I read till I was about 13 and stopped for a few years, and then got back into it. And when I reinvestigated, it's like, oh my god, this was the comic I always wished for. You know, it was soap opera, but in the DC universe. You know, and really those 56 issues of the regular title, they're a complete story in and of itself. I don't think that was their intention then, but there was something about the just the dynamic that particular creative team had of telling, you know, something that goes from A to B as long as they needed to do it. And another series that I think really fits into what you were talking about with the commanding dynamic is Killraven.
Yes.
Yeah, Killraven is very much in that basis where you see this world unfold, and it's an extended storyline, but with very definitive chapters as the story goes along. Yeah.
Well,
it's the drop in and drop out aspect. You know, you can't just like jump into the middle of literally any title nowadays. You can't just jump in the middle of it and pick it up and figure out what's going on. Like, God forbid anybody pick up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, pick up an issue of any X-Men title at this point and just figure out what's been going on the past 10 years. You can't. But yeah, I mean, that it just allows it to be more welcoming.
And you mentioned Tim Truman a while ago, and I think Grimjack does a lot of that same work, and like I'm a big fan of that. But you also mentioned Jim Shooter, and I want to kind of dive into that point, because what you said is kind of the Jim Shooter philosophy of, you know, every comic might be somebody's first comic, so we need to revamp that. But there's a tangential aspect to that we really don't talk about. And now that we've had 80 years of comics and we're like very much far past the Jim Shooter era, there's also this aspect of it's not everybody's first comic, but it also allows for you to go back and read things in history. Bill, Steve, and I talk about this all the time. I'm 36 years old. Some of my favorite, like I've got a shelf full of omnibuses over here, right? One of my favorite things is to go back in and find back issues that were printed, you know, well before I started reading comics, right? And being able to understand them. Jim Shooter's philosophy not only allows somebody who it's their first issue to read, but it allows me 40 years after the fact to go back and like read this work and understand it. And I don't think that rereadability or that longevity is going to be a thing in 40 years from now that readers can go back and do. I really don't feel like we're going to have the rereadability of comics that we are in the current era of comics that are great. I'm not knocking them at all. I love modern comics. I'm still very much a reader and a collector. But from that aspect, if we're talking about continuity, there's not that inroad where you can go back and pinpoint an area of time and open it up and read it and have a cohesive understanding of what's happening. If I were to go open up just an issue of or an arc of Immortal Hulk from 2 years ago, I'm not going to get it in 20 years, right? Versus these things that we're talking about, I can. And I love that you're incorporating that aspect into your work. And I think a lot of independent writers and artists are to their work as well, with the idea that, hey, this is going to have a lasting future, that readers, like we want readers to be able to pick this up going forward, not just when they buy it off Kickstarter right now, but when they see it on a shelf years from now, or when it's passed down years from now. You're going to be able to pick it up and read it and get it. So I just think that's a great philosophy.
We are living in a golden age, though, of not having to bike to 15 different newsstands to find that one issue that the distributor didn't get, at your local grocery store. Now we can find almost everything is in print, or it sure feels that way. Even if something has fallen out of print, you can still try to track it down, or you get the digital version. So I want to make sure that I don't sound like I'm Mr. Sour Grapes about these new comics, blah blah blah.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to 2020.
Yeah, and
there's a lot of benefits. Yeah,
it's fascinating to me though. But to your point, Caleb, about being able to go back. I mean, that's kind of the beautiful thing about creator-owned books. With Hellboy, you can start with Seed of Destruction and just go. with The Walking Dead, where do I begin? How about volume 1? You know, it's that kind of thing. Or Invincible, you know, if you like hardcovers, you can get the really nice hardcovers, you can get the trades. But yeah, I do really enjoy that depth of information that you get from a long run. You know, some of my favorite books that have come out have not been the series of miniseries type books. I loved Earthright at Image, you know, and that ran over like eight trades, or Seeley and Norton's Revival, also at Image, again was like about an 8 trade adventure, and it just, I don't know, I love the longer storylines, and I feel like when books run on for longer than a year, sometimes in the direct market, they lose the shiny quality, and people tend to forget about them. Reviewers, you know, don't always review, you know, I don't know.
They go for number 1. Yeah, they go for not number 28, you know.
Right. Yeah. It becomes old news at one point. And I think that's a shame, because I think a lot of just,
yeah,
I love to keep, as a reader and as a creator, I love to keep returning to these universes and returning to these characters and seeing where they're at. Particularly, again, the auteur aspect of it, because I realized when John Byrne left the FF that I wasn't a blind FF reader. I loved the FF by Byrne. I loved it by Lee and Kirby, and I later loved it by Wade and Wieringo. And yeah, having long runs from all of these creators just make it special. I think I've become the Ouroboros, and I've started eating my tail. So I'm tagging out. Somebody else talk, please, before I talk again.
I was going to say, it's like, that's a talent that I think somebody would pay a lot of money for. But no, I you know, being able to look back. I mean, I just want to jump onto sort of like the idea of the auteur era of a lot of these, you know, books, and, you know, bringing it back to Swamp Thing specifically for Alan Moore and his, you know, his massive work on that Saga of the Swamp Thing. Plus, you know, there's something there where someone gets the ability to really meditate and chew on, you know, philosophical and social and, you know, all of these different questions and ideas that they, as a writer, as a creator, have, you know, think about all the time. Alan Moore is a very interesting animal, and he has a lot of interesting thoughts about stuff, especially after eating a ton of mushrooms all the time. But having that and having the ability to sort of explore that over a long period of time. And yeah, there's some, you know, there are some jump in moments in Swamp Thing, you know, where you can just sort of, you know, you hop in, you read an issue, and you're like, okay, I get it. Yeah. But if you're there for the long haul and you continue to return to that, and you continue to meditate on what the, you know, the author, what the creator is meditating, you know, on as well, I think that's much more rewarding as a long-term reader and fan. And that's something that, you know, needs to be cultivated over a period of time. But it's interesting, you know, you were saying that that's kind of also part of the inspiration for Undead or Alive, is that you have, you know, not just the sort of like the Kirby era, you know, stuff where you can jump into a story, a short story or a chapter, and just like, I get it, you know, you don't have to read the whole thing to really understand it. But also, I think, or maybe this is just me speculating, the fact that you're putting this out in a trade with multiple chapters allows you to kind of do both, to, you know, be able to jump in, but also to kind of like, hey, I want to, you know, explore this a little bit more, you know, than just sort of like, hey, here's a quick short story about this character, or this, you know, this monster, and how these characters interact, and, you know, how this force of nature works, you know.
Well, it came together in a really weird way, because it was originally a pitch to Tim Seeley for Hack Slash, where I don't know if you're familiar with Hack Slash, but especially the early arcs, Tim would take a different, movie monster and do his riff on that monster as a slasher within the hack slash universe. And I got really into that book when I started getting the omnibuy from it, because I was fascinated with how he did his world building. And again, as an artist starting to write, I could look at what Tim did, because he started as an artist and then became an artist who writes, and that made writing a lot more tangible to me. But I sent him a pitch, riffing on comic tropes, but framing it as hack slash. And the pitch for this story was the physiognomy lesson, was what it was called, because it was a riff on the first Alan Moore story, the anatomy lesson. And then there was also a story about kind of a riff on Ghastly Graham Ingalls, the EC artist. A storyline that I in that pitch of Cassie and Vlad investigating a cartoonist who's killed, and it's a riff on Graham Ingalls and also on the Al Williamson, Archie Goodwin success story from Creepy or Eerie or whatever it was. But yeah, that was my original pitch. Tim didn't go with it, so I just decided to file off the serial numbers. And at the time, Jason and I pitched it to Michael Marisi as a backup in Hoax Hunters, because Hoax Hunters originally started as a backup in Hack Slash. And I thought, well, maybe this is a way to sneak into Image. And it ran for about 4 issues before they didn't have the allotment for the page numbers for it. But yeah, I mean, the first few chapters were written as 2-pagers. Again, it was an experiment in form, kind of like doing a webcomic. But instead of having 1 page a week, we had 2 pages a month, and tried to make it engaging and kind of contained. And then when Hoax Hunters wrapped up, we went back to the OGN format. And we actually kickstarted a version of this, I think, 10 years ago now. But it didn't fund. And, over the last 10 years, when Jason has not had as much time to pick away at it, we kind of realized we need to bring somebody else in. But I had written it as an OGN after the Hack Slash pitch and after the Hoax Hunters backup. I'd written it as an OGN, but it was still broken down into 22-page chapters. And again, I've lost the thread of where I was going with it. But yeah, it does feel kind of like you were saying, having the chapter quality. I don't know that each chapter is as complete as it could be, to bring it back to the material we're talking about. But it definitely has its roots in episodic format.
Well, Steve, let me ask you this then. You just mentioned kind of, I mean, we're talking about a very relatively short span of time, and you just mentioned kind of designing a book or designing a narrative that you dropped, 1 or 2 pages every couple of weeks, kind of a webtoons kind of thing where you're dropping little bits, to now you're using Kickstarter. You're not just dropping single issues like you do with Evie and the Van Helsings, but you're dropping a graphic novel. So from a producer standpoint, right, from not only just a writer and artist and creator, but from a producer who has to also go and decide where you're going to put spot varnish and when French flash and all that stuff that we love. But how do you navigate this kind of rapidly changing technological landscape where that also includes a very fickle reading audience where sometimes we want the webtoons, right? We want a new thing a week or something, but sometimes we want just whole volumes and stuff like that. What is your thought process when you're developing something new, or when you're just developing the next chapter of something?
Okay, you kind of froze, but I
think,
oh, there you are.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. So I think
no
the
problem.
syntax is, what is your thought process like when you're developing something like that? Either something brand new, like Undead, or like Athena Voltaire. Like, how do you navigate that rapidly changing technological landscape and the fickle nature of comics buyers?
I got to admit, I'm super spoiled. I'm part of a Kickstarter group, and not just the Kickstarter group, but also like on social media. I have a lot of creator friends, and frequently the topic of branding comes up, and I realized that I don't really think about my quote unquote brand. I just, again, I feel like I'm stupid lucky in that if I want to play with a certain genre, because I get really excited about various genres, or play with a format, I just dive in, and for the most part, I have a nice chunk of my audience that looks like they kind of follow me on whatever self-indulgent thread I want to go down, and that's pretty cool. So I don't really have a lot of thought process other than when I'm reading something, I'm like, ooh, I'd like to try that. And yeah, it's just I'll have these nerd conversations with my friends about formatting, and we'll do the exact same things that we're talking about tonight,
Sure.
about analyzing the books that we liked and why we liked them, and what worked. And eventually that kind of bubbles up in the background, and I'm like, ooh, I want to write a riff on 1970s Marvel Western characters in that Kirby format, which may exist on my hard drive somewhere. But yeah, I'm really fortunate because I don't have to think about that. I've got a certain amount of goodwill from enough people that so far they've indulged me for the most part. So that's pretty cool.
That is good. I mean, Oh, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, let me rephrase the question a little bit. I feel like I'm cross-examining you. I hope it doesn't come across that way. But
no, this is fun.
So let's change the question a little bit. Instead of me asking you that, what if I'm a comic creator, right? Like, what if I'm somebody who's planning a Kickstarter and who comes to you and says, Steve Bryant, huge Athena Voltaire fan, love Evie and the Van Helsings, love all the stuff you're doing. Like, I'm scared about what I'm putting out. How do I decide how to navigate that fickle nature of comic readership and the rapidly evolving and changing way that technology affects the production of comics? How do I decide what to put out? What is your thought process on that as a veteran comic creator?
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is the best route because, I was just talking about how fortunate I was that I've had people follow me along. But again, I know where I am in the comic landscape. I'm not an A-lister, a B-lister, a C-lister, or a D-lister, but I have people who indulge me. So if you want that cult level of an audience, I think the best way to do it is to do what moves you and be genuine about it. So in my day job now, I've been teaching at Illinois State in the School of Creative Technologies, and one of the classes I teach is it's called Basic Skills in the Digital Arts, and it's a lot of just like best practices. Mm-hmm. But we have a lecture on social media and crowdfunding, and I did a deep dive into various like bands and musicians, in addition to comic people, but bands and musicians who also crowdfund. And are you guys familiar with the Double Clicks? They do. They're a pair of siblings. They do kind of nerd folk music, like songs about D&D and stuff like that. But like 5 of their Kickstarted albums have landed in the Billboard comedy charts, and it's all been funded on Kickstarter. But one of the siblings, Laser, which is an objectively awesome name, I just want to say that. Laser also consults on crowdfunding, and they said that the most important thing is to be genuine, to come at this from a place of authenticity. And the more I think about it, the more I do think that crowdfunding audiences respond to that. And when I say that, I'm not saying don't get on there and say, help me make my dream project come true, because I think people view that as charity. But if you get on there and just show your enthusiasm and show that you're not trying to come up with some contrived thing that is obviously, a paint by numbers kind of thing, I think people, enthusiasm is contagious, and I think people respond to that. The downside is, the thing that I would tell anybody that wants to do crowdfunding, you need to build that audience first, whether it's going to conventions or posting, your artwork online or whatever, or your stories online, whatever you're doing. You've got to have the audience before you go to Kickstarter. The audience generally doesn't discover you when you have the crowdfunded thing up there. Maybe they discover you through fan art, or maybe they discover you through selling a self-published book that you could afford to print 25 copies of, and you took that to such and such convention. But people do respond to enthusiasm, and they respond to believing that you're making your best effort.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, there are no short answers with me, and
yeah, sorry, I've been hogging part of the internet. Like, I'm just such a process nerd when it comes to this stuff.
I talk way too much though, but I'll talk your ear off about this.
Okay, I have a question which might be a little uncomfortable, but I'm going to ask it. You mentioned that this was the subject of an unsuccessful Kickstarter previously. What were some of the lessons learned from that?
So it was the second Kickstarter I had done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we did it in like 2013. And a lot of it was, I hadn't built up a track record yet. Mm-hmm. I had done, the first Athena Voltaire Kickstarter, and it was hell to fulfill because I didn't know how to plan for everything that I was doing. We didn't have podcasts like Comics Launch that had advertisers telling you, here's where you buy Gemini mailers, here's where you can buy this. And just the ubiquity of crowdfunding, particularly for comics, the information is out there, and that makes it so much easier than 2010, 2013, when it was still stone knives and bear skins to try to get through this. Thank you, Dr. McCoy from City on the Edge of Forever. Sorry. But yeah, I think that was probably my biggest lesson, and I think the mistake for me on that one was we were trying to fund it as an OGN, and we didn't have the book done. And I feel like if you're going to try to fund it as an OGN, having the book done really helps a lot. And so that's where we are now, and I really don't. I prefer having everything done when we're running the campaign, so that we can just send it off. I think those have been the biggest lessons. But like in terms of how the book itself changed, it's funny when Jason and I shared it with Patrick. One of the first things that he pointed out was, "Wow, this is really white." And again, that was such. He pointed it out, and I was like, "Oh my God, you're right." It was such a blind spot for me when we had written this in, I really think it started in like 2011 in Hoax Hunters versus I think my worldview has grown, and I hope it has. And when he pointed that out, yeah, we decided maybe there are some different ways that we can play these characters because they were all pretty stock adventure characters, and I think there's a lot more nuance to the characters now. So I don't know that that's necessarily a difference in it being funded now versus then. But I think it's a lot more interesting to me now. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Actually, speaking of, because we have a lot of illustrations where you're talking about, having a finished book and having a finished product there as being really important for Kickstarters. We've talked to other people who have crowdfunded their work, and that's one of the things that they've brought up is like, hey, we have this already done. What we're doing is just getting the extra, getting that extra bit of distance so that we can actually get it in the hands of people. Like, we've got it here. Here's what it looks like. This is everything. And I'm going to start pulling them up. These are some of the images that you provided, and just to get a look at what these pages look like.
And that one, Patrick. Sorry, I interrupted you. I'm rude.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, actually, if you could give us a, this makes great radio, so to speak. For people who aren't watching the video live or later on YouTube. I mean, if you could describe sort of like what we're seeing here with these pages.
Well, everything I sent you was from chapters 1 and 2. I did send you a PDF of the whole book for you to read, but I also sent it this morning, so I know that I didn't give you enough time for it. But I didn't want to share any issue 3 pages because I didn't want to spoil stuff. But we're onto a Jason page now that he drew and painted, and I feel like he and Patrick have different storytelling sensibilities, but they're also both grounded in very classic, comic fundamentals that I feel like their work complements each other nicely. So I'm not sure what else to talk about other than the fact that I am stupid lucky being able to collaborate with people that are my friends that do really, really good work. So this one's another Jason page. And like looking at 1, 2, 3, panel 4, you can definitely see a lot of his Neil Adams influence on that with the way
the hands.
Ended.
Oh yeah.
And then that's one of our promos.
I love this image here. I just like the design so much of.
I told you Patrick's really good at monsters.
Well, and so what we're showing on screen is a promo for Undead or Alive, and it's got a picture of the monster. And it says a swamp thing is terrorizing Gerber's Crossing. Need we say more? And what I love about this image is it's not just monsters, like in the aspect of it, like an homage to Swamp Thing, which we've been talking about a lot for obvious reasons. If you can see the art or if you Google the art, like we're talking about Swamp Thing, we're talking about Man Thing in the Heap. But like if you're looking at the sensibility of the monster design, there's also elements. I mean, we've been talking about Kirby multiple times. That heavy brow is 100% Kirby's design on the Thing, right? And so there's an element of this that goes back to just the history of monsters. Like, what are these creatures that are not human, and what do they say about the the world that we live in and this theme of comics and especially in superhero comics, right? Like, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the Ouroboros of, these are not all horror has monsters, but all monster stories is an element of horror to some degree, right? And I think it does a really good job of paying homage to that. Like, this is Swamp Thing. This is that the thing that lurks in the woods, but it's also it's the Thing, right? It's Fantastic Four superhero, heavy brow, like. And if you go back and read those early comic issues, it's dealing with his humanity. Does my visage and the way that I'm projected make me something other than human? And I really like that aspect of it because it does throw back to just kind of the roots of American comics, maybe, like in.
No,
oh no, cut out.
I think you totally nailed it though, because it's funny. I had not made the connection to the Thing until you pointed that out. And I think so many of us, and not just the creative team, but so many of us that have grown up with Western comics, or particularly American comics, we've internalized so many of these designs that we don't think twice about it. But yeah, that's a great catch about the heavy brow. Okay, again, can I just point out, look at the way that Jason painted that freaking brow. Look at the highlights on it, and the way that everything he's doing complements the linear structure of the way that Patrick has drawn it. And again, this is one of the things that I love about working with Jason, because sometimes I'm sure you've seen this before, where you'll see a colorist who's at odds with the structure that the penciler has drawn, and the penciler has maybe left an area completely open, and the colorist has gone in and completely rendered out all the structure of the nose, and they don't look like they're complementing each other. They look like two soloists, each playing a different song and a different solo simultaneously. But I love the way that Jason's colors always support whoever he's painting on. If it's Patrick here, or if it's Don on Evie and the Helsings, or me on Athena Voltaire, he's always paying attention to the structure. And again, I marvel at the way that Patrick draws monsters. I'm with you, Caleb. Was it you that mentioned liking this image?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I'm with you. This image is also on the credits page. I blew it up as a double page spread. I used it in this ad. I feel like Patrick's drawing of the creature itself is just freaking impeccable. And like the way, if you look at, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm going deep inside baseball here, but like the way that he's rendering, I'm using my cursor like you guys can see. If you look at the right side of the monster, just the contours of it, where you get the lumps, and the way he's kind of rendering across the contour of the lumps, it's got this beautiful Nestor Redondo quality to it. If you like checked out his Rima the Jungle Girl stuff, and I think he did some Swamp Thing stuff too, but it's got that Redondo.
The later issues,
I just love it. Okay, I'll shut up.
Okay, I do have a question in terms of content, because there is one concept that I don't think ever gets its due when we talk about creatures along these lines, and creature was the word, and that's Creature from the Black Lagoon. Has elements from that crept into this at all?
It's my absolute favorite Universal monster. And you've seen the Art Adams adaptation, right?
Yeah. I'm also asking you this because I'm going to Blobfest in a few weeks, and I'm seeing Creature in 3D in a theater.
Wow.
So.
What is Blobfest?
Okay. The theater scenes in the Blob were filmed in Phoenixville, PA, in a small theater in Phoenixville, PA. The theater still exists. So every year they have a Blob Fest where they show not only the Blob, but the Blob Returns, Blob remakes, everything, with the Blob. But they also bring in other things like the guys from Riff Tracks and Cinematic Titanic have done stuff. And there's always something, that feeds into it, but is a little different. And this year it's Creature from the Black Lagoon. I'm not going to be there on Saturday when they reenact running out of the theater, which I would love to do, but I will be there for Creature in 3D.
Very cool.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
So I have
that,
Creature from the Black Lagoon on my mind. And again, Rico was the last living Universal monster. And I'm just looking at, it's water and it's green, and it seems to be part of the equation that never gets talked about when you are talking about Man Thing, Swamp Thing, Heap hybrids. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
It's funny, on the Kickstarter video, we have a reward level where you get a sketch card, and I actually said your you'll get a randomly drawn swamp, muck, or lagoon monster. So, yeah, I was looking for an excuse to draw the creature. Gosh, there was a Universal Monsters portfolio that was put out 35 years ago. And I remembered ordering it through Diamond that had like Jeff Butler, I think, did Bela Lugosi's Dracula. But the coolest piece in the portfolio was Mark Nelson did the Creature from the Black Lagoon on Duo Shade board. And if you're familiar with Mark's stuff, he did the first Aliens series that Dark Horse did, the black and white one.
Yeah.
And yeah, he did the creature like that. And nobody draws monsters like Mark. So yeah, any chance for me to incorporate the creature into anything, I'm there. I almost wore my creature shirt tonight. I should have.
Nice. Okay, cool. All right. In terms of the Kickstarter, what's the time frame of what's left, and give us all the details along those lines.
We close on Thursday, July 18th. Let me see what time it closes, because I'm not 100% sure.
Well, while you're seeing what time it closes, I can gladly say that you have passed the $8,000 mark, and so you are fully funded.
Yes.
You have 210 backers, and there are 6 days to go. So, first of all, congratulations. You are now walking through the process of unlocking. I'm assuming all the extra stuff that come with extra money and stuff like that. Yeah. Congratulations on that. It's big doings.
It's exciting. I love stretch goal stuff. I can't deny. I like when I package up the Kickstarters. I like having the comic bag with mini prints and other fun stuff in there. We didn't fund quickly enough to get the funded in 48 hours sticker that I wanted to do, but I'm a sucker for that too. Well, my iPad has stickers all over it because I'm a big old nerd. But yeah, the campaign ends on the 18th, so a week from today at 5:10 Central Time, so 6:10 your time. Do the math for the other time zones. I don't know.
Central. You had it right with Central. Nobody else matters.
They all matter. I love you all dearly.
We are hurt here in the future where we're experiencing 1040.
Understand, we come first. Come first.
Dude, I live in Arkansas. It's like 1954 here.
Hey, Mayberry's right up the road for me, so literally.
I'm in the middle of the flatlands.
Well, that's awesome. I am one of those proud backers as well, and of course, as always, I like to get a nice solid book in hand. But there's also digital rewards as well, and for people who aren't trying to build up the massive piles of stuff that they can't fit on shelves. There are digital copies that you can also pledge for. So that's What other kind of rewards awards are you thinking for for other pledge levels as well? You mentioned being able to draw anything, but
well, this one's a little more simple than past times. Part of it is just that I'm still part of the class action lawsuit against Action Lab for Athena Voltaire and Ghoul Scouts, and right now it's getting harder and harder to get copies of the books. So I can't really fold them into the rewards because then it becomes a matter of if I'm paying essentially $10 for this $15 book, and the only profit in there is $5 going toward the campaign. Is it really worth putting that in there and depleting my stock? So yeah, it's goofy little things like that where maybe they get added onto the backer kit stuff, and we divide up the monies that way. Sorry, that was way inside baseball. Okay, rewards. So yeah, we've got digital reward. PDF of the book, a print edition for $25. For $50, you can get it with a signed and sketched on book plate with a sketch from Patrick, a sketch from Jason, and a sketch from me. We had thought about sketching in the books themselves, but that's kind of time and cost prohibitive because you get the book printed, they get shipped to me, and if we have to ship 40 books to Patrick out in California and Jason in Chicago and me, how much are we going to have to add the cost there, and how much of a weight is there to get the books out? But the nice thing about doing it with the book plate, I can send 50 book plates to Patrick. He can do his sketch, send them to Jason. He can do his sketch, send them to me. We can have all that done by the time the books are printed in here. So it just makes sense time-wise and cost-wise. So that's like $50, $75, and this is where we go into the limited stuff. I think we have 30 total sketch cards where, you'll get a random sketch card either by Patrick or Jason or me of a swamp monster or a muck monster or maybe something that dwells in a lagoon. I don't know. And then for $100, we've got named in the book. So your name is either in there or you are, a sign or a business name or something like that. We have two or three draw me in rewards left for 200 where your likeness is in the book. And I can't believe this happened, but we sold out of the shot where you're killed in the book, which has a likeness and somebody essentially saying, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," with your name as a shout out. So those are going to be kind of fun. I love
that.
And well, it's fun because the first person that did that wrote and said, they gave me a description of their character, and we had to write a new page to fit the character in anyway. So we've got like a snotty person. They did you remember Gary Shandling's Larry Sanders Show where every time anybody was on there, they were portrayed as a total asshole.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So this person wrote and they came up with a horrible character. Can I be this, and this? Yeah, that sounds like fun. So, it's somebody that when you see them get their just desserts, it's kind of fun. So again, it escalated so far beyond what we thought we would have in this book that it's just stupid fun. But yeah, those rewards are all gone. So You don't want them anyway.
I love it.
All right. Well, we wish you the best of luck in these last six point whatever days, and we certainly hope you come back on with whatever your next project is, and also good luck with the resolution of Athena Voltaire and Ghoul Scouts down the road.
I'll be begging to come on and celebrate that one.
Yeah.
Special announcement, special guest. We have someone on who has something very fun to say. Yeah.
So, legitimately speaking, there are 2 licensed attorneys on this podcast. Like, there are conversations that could be had.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like after the fact. After the fact,
Yeah,
like
after
the analysis that could be.
Can't be construed as legal advice. Blah, 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 blah.
Our representative is doing God's work. He's doing great. But yes, I sometimes forget that that's what you guys do for a gig. So that's
one of them's past tense.
I look like an average attorney, right? Like so.
Yeah.
But you guys have DC stuff to talk about, don't you?
Yeah. Do you want to stick around or?
Well, I told Carrie I'd be upstairs by 10 o'clock. So if I sign off now, I'll be in her good graces.
Well, we don't want to get in the way of that.
Yeah. Very fair.
I feel bad sneaking off because this is always fun. And I feel like I talk way too long, though, because you guys have other things.
We would have shut you up. Don't worry.
Okay. So I'll be back on in January, and I'll get my green jacket. Is that how it works?
Possibly.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna have to figure something. We have to like memorialize this somehow.
It'll be a paper doll.
Yeah. I don't know.
Just to cut out. Yeah.
Stick my head through a hole. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
we gotta work it out, or maybe send you like a celebratory bear claw from a high end bakery or something.
Send me your jacket size.
I gotta watch my A1Cs, man. So I can't card up. Okay, I drove Caleb away.
Killed him. He's dead.
Yes, he was done with that.
He's like, fuck this guy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm scary.
All right, Steve. We'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I don't know. Let's see if Caleb. Caleb's just a squiggle.
He's just he's a spinning squiggle right now.
Yeah.
I just want to keep watching it go around.
All I know is it did a world of good my reboot. So hopefully he'll come back.
It could be that. I know.
This would have been a good week for news because there's been a lot of news.
There's a lot, especially the past couple of days.
Yeah, between the today with was it today or yesterday they announced that Random House Penguin purchased Booms.
It's either last night or this morning. Like it was within the past 24 hours. Yeah. And
those will tie in with the books I'm going to be talking about. DC did announce their Absolute line, which is a counterpart to Ultimate in a sense.
Right.
And some very big name creators. And,
Absolutely.
With
Absolute.
That was worse than my unbearable pun. With Scott Snyder overseeing Absolute Batman and Jason Aaron on Absolute Superman. Jeff Lemire is going to be on a book to be announced. Really big names.
I hope it's Swamp Thing.
I think it's I'm looking for Swamp Thing. They even mentioned, and we'll talk about Bill when you do your book, but they mentioned a character who I haven't really seen for years, popping in like as a cameo, but still I'm like that. I want to see more of that. Speaking of Lemire, I want to see more of that particular character and his daughter. Yeah. So,
but we'll see. We'll see. It sounds like they have a very structured plan with it. I'm just wondering how much of the bandwidth for the publishing it's going to take up. And
it is going to run concurrently. With standard, with the standard books and the regular continuity. And they even said something about how there's potentially some crossover continuity that might
so
be part of this.
Almost feels like we're going back to Earth 1 and Earth 2 a little bit.
Yeah.
Which, hey, I grew up with, so I never understood that. I never understood it. At 6 years old, I understood Earth 1 and Earth 2. At 6 years old, I got it. It's so confusing. Shut up.
So silly.
But now with at least one generation that grew up with multiverse stuff, it might be an easier haul for some people. It might not be so precious.
Yeah.
Look, Caleb's at bottom now. He was at top, now he's at bottom.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
the way you're positioned on
the way you're positioned.
Yeah, no, I got moved down to the bottom of the heap. Fair enough. That joke is only
going
to
heap.
I see it. Full circle.
Yeah.
I was confused for a second. Sorry. And for the listeners, I got off of the internet for 5 seconds of Steve's interview. So I apologize for that, but just want to say I would like to echo these two gentlemen. Congratulations on meeting.
Oh, you're breaking my heart, Caleb. You're frozen again.
When your heart's not open.
Hey, buddy,
I'm going to murder my internet provider.
And you might, maybe you should switch to your phone. That's the perfect freeze. Oh my god.
Yeah. It's just that's technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen, and thems.
This is fascinating to watch. Oh my god.
Oh. I mean, we're all there. If it's not the interwebs, it's the computers. If it's not the computers, it's the interwebs. It's just this is.
Yeah.
We're supposed to have thunderstorms tomorrow. Whether or not that materializes or not, at least the temperature is going to drop down to 81. So feel like winter.
It's funny. I thought Blobfest was next Sunday that I'm going. It's actually this Sunday. So now I got to check the weather. And Saturday they do have rain scheduled, but I don't know when, and it might be it's probably too early to figure that out. But
yeah,
it's a bit of a ride, but
it's this weekend at Phoenixville.
At Phoenixville, PA. Yep. And Rob Stager is going to go. So there's that crew of mine. So if people have been familiar with the podcasting exploits, he's a familiar name. So,
absolutely.
Really looking forward to this.
That's cool. I didn't know that they did that, but I think that's really clever.
Yeah.
And I'm actually,
I think actually Mystery Science Theater did it last year.
Cool.
I think they actually had. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's a beautiful picture.
Phone. And I got a Tom of Finland shirt on, and I got tattoos, and I'm a bottom.
All of those things are true. All of those things are true. I mean, the last one is it's a coin toss, right? But I mean, all of those things are true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you want to start talking some comics now that we all three are technically on board here?
Woo-hoo. Yeah, let's do it. Let me see if I can make technology work for me.
All right, so I think I should start first because I have a DC book, so I will start first, and it's actually a series of DC books. So we saw last week the release of Absolute Power #1, which is DC's big crossover event for the summer, and it did have some lead up. Some of the series that were published recently, Brainiac Goings On in Action Comics lead into it. The Dream Team miniseries with the Suicide Squad leads into it. Green Arrow leads into it. Stuff that's going on with the United Planets with Green Lantern leads into it. So we did have series that were feeding into it, but in terms of the official times, it were basically right at the start. Now, one thing I never understood, and this is, I don't think it's been as much of the forefront recently, but like in the early 2000s, you just heard people bitching and bitching and bitching how much they hated crossovers, and it takes them out of an event, blah, 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 blah. I fucking love crossovers. I love crossovers. I love good crossovers. I love bad crossovers. Millennium was a terrible crossover, but brother, that was one of the best planned out crossovers ever. People forget, oh, you're on mute there.
I'm a Joe Staten, Mark. How dare you, sir?
It's awful. Millennium's awful. I think Joe Staten.
I fucking love it. I will fight you over this.
Really, but in terms of the scope of it and the planning, I mean, it's airtight. That series was airtight, and that was the way to do it. Like 2 months into it, you were in and out.
But there's a level of facetiousness in what I'm saying, but I will go back for Millennium.
It's god awful. I mean, Steve Englehart is a writer I absolutely adore, but la bamba.
It's got heart, man. It's got heart.
Yeah, but then you think of like crossovers and more recent ventures. Those amazing one-off stories that were associated with House of M, and I love crossovers. I fucking love crossovers. If you're complaining of crossovers, shut the fuck up. Okay, so that's my spiel. And Steve, I know you have some graphics here. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because we can't stay on too much longer. But Absolute Power had its first preview in this year's Free Comic Book Day. I do have the deluxe edition, and I think Steve, do you have it too? I think you said something about it.
I think I do. It is filed, but it did have the beautiful cover, the foil etched.
I thought that's what I was getting. I got a sketch cover. I've got sketch cover. I'm so upset about that. But one thing I do like that DC is doing now for all of their variant covers is they're including the main cover when you open it. I'll show this and some other things. Yeah. So this was basically the introduction to it, and it does include preview pages. But some of the previews and some of the most potent material in the previews took place in Absolute Power Ground Zero. This is a one-shot. I know you have a graphic of this. This is 3 interconnected stories which tie directly into the start of Absolute Power. The first is co-written by Mark Waid, and I actually think all of these are co-written by Mark Waid with Nicole Maines, who had written the Suicide Squad Dream Team, and that continues threads where the 2 main characters are Dreamer and Jay Nakamura. Now, you've all heard me talk about Jay Nakamura and what a dud he is, okay? This actually gives him some depth and some fire, and it was really nice to see that. So again, Gamora was, basically ground zero, pun, for Amanda Waller's plans to rid the planet of super-powered beings. This is like, it's almost like a classic comic, trope there. It's like something that, sounds almost like, like a serial villain would do, but that's what's happening. So you have some very interesting dynamics about where Jay Nakamura is. He's been basically kidnapped. He's in Waller's custody, and he finds out that Dreamer actually was aiding this effort, for her own reasons. And it's really displays betrayal in a very nuanced way. I really like this first story. The second story concerns and I'm sorry if I'm blanking on the creative team. I can look it up really quickly here. This was written by Chip Zdarsky with Mark Waid, with V. Ken Marion on art. Basically G-list villain named Time Commander is acquired by Waller into the fold, and the notion of time travel is playing a part in some of the in some of the goings on as we will see things move forward. And then the last story picks right up on the World of Brainiac stories. And this actually, I have to correct myself. This was Josh Williamson himself with Greg Melnikov on art, and tells the story of a one of the Lady Brainiac drones, and who Waller basically becomes her mother. It's really fucking creepy, but it ties in directly with the robotic creatures like Failsafe and these new super powerful Amazos that are on the scene. Another tie-in was Green Arrow number 13. That's the main cover. I got the Pride cover, which with this is actually Connor, but it doesn't look much like Connor. Like initially, I thought it may have been Mia Dearden. But it's Connor in a pose. And like I said, all the DC variant covers now give you the regular cover. Really nice development. I'm very happy about that.
That is very cool.
Yeah. And basically, Ollie, and for reasons that are not very clear to me, and I have to say I'm not up on Green Arrow, but Waller did apparently aid him with Merlin in defeating Merlin. So there's some ode there. But in a very rapid, almost impulsive way, Ollie becomes an agent of the wall, as it says on the cover there, and he's going to aid her in this effort to remove superpowered beings, and things just don't make sense. Behind this, though, there is this effort between Leah and Roy Harper to free Leah's mother and Roy's former lover Cheshire from custody, which they're successful in doing, but it also exposes where Ollie is at right now. This is really out of character for him as far as I'm concerned. I don't think his issues with if he's going to be against something, his own wife. I always forget what the continuity is right now with Ollie and Dinah right now. That's against her, and we'll see how that plays out. But it's a strange development. Whether he's a mole or there's something else going on, or time travel might even be part of it. We'll have to see that play out. The big one, though, is Absolute Power #1, the first issue. And Steve, you did read this?
I did, and I actually also got the shiny cover issue, which includes the back cover too. Advertising Barda. But yeah, I agree. Like it is really nice to have the actual like A cover, right on the inside, so you see kind of the original intended printing.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is gorgeous. This was a Wes Craig, and he's been doing a couple different issues lately.
The creative team for this is Mark Waid and Dan Mora, who were the creative team. I say were in the past. I believe Dan Mora is returning to World's Finest after a few arcs. I believe that's what's happening. But so they're in the driver's seat for this particular event. Now, as I've said, there is this effort on Waller's part to rid the world of superpowered beings, and whether it's heroes or villains, it doesn't matter. You talked about a cameo. The first characters we see affected are Animal Man and Animal Girl, characters we haven't seen in a little while. Animal Girl was she was in Robin and Tim Drake or something.
She's popped up here and there.
But we really haven't seen Buddy in a while. And what was really nice about this was, a big thing as a nation that we're contending with is disinformation. And when you throw that into the DC universe, the ramifications are mind blowing. There are videos of, Shazam attacking civilians. There are videos out there of the Flash doing the same. And we find out this is an impossibility because Supergirl's in space when this footage is actually happening. Hal doesn't even have a ring, and Hal Jordan is attacking people. So it's all on disinformation that's working because the public sentiment is going against the heroes. There is no Justice League because of the disbanding. So there really isn't like an A-list A-list entity that can respond to this. So it basically is the perfect time for the superhero powered community to be fractured for an event like this to happen. This also happens at a rapid pace. I mean, like this is, I believe it's a little bit more than 22 pages. I believe it's like 30 pages, but I read this so quickly, but it wasn't like, an image book, from 1993 where every page was a splash page. It wasn't that kind of quick read, but it was, a very rapid read. Superman is basically the first down. He gets shot and loses his powers basically at the same time. Similar thing happens to John Kent and to Connor Kent. We have more questions than answers about how everything is transpiring. When question marks are, over Batman's head, it's a little scary. We end on a particular cliffhanger with one of the characters that I had mentioned, John Kent, not knowing where he is, and with tubes out of him, and stuff happens so rapidly, and seeing the heroes lose is really hard to watch sometimes. I've always, you can handle like one, but when you see an entire community of it happen, it's really disturbing that we have absolute as the first word in this, and the DC just announced a new line. I'm certain it's going to tie in there, but it looks like we have a summer of a lot of fun, because that was another thing. Like, some crossovers aren't a lot of fun, and even though what's happening is really disastrous, it's fun for the reader. And it's nice to see this with Mark Waid, because it's like this is kind of his third act in a sense. And for somebody whose first published work with the big two was in 1984, that's still putting out such high quality writing, it's just great to see. And then the last book I'll talk about is the Batman 150 anniversary. You've got the main cover there, but the cover I got is the Jose Luis Garcia Lopez style guide cover, which you have to turn this way, but you open it up and hey, you got the regular cover of Batman 150. The majority of the book, though, doesn't concern Absolute Power. It's a one-off, done-in-one story that Chip Zdarsky did with Dennis Cowan, which is really nice. It's about the denizens of Gotham and how they interpret Batman, and it's a really nice done-in-one story. But the backup does tie in directly into Absolute Power. It's basically what happens, like, it's basically like a postscript to issue number 1. And the big thing that we discover is they find out that Amanda Waller has a mother box. So it's, it's like there's all these DC threads being thrown together. And, you see, little glimpses of stuff in the other books, that the next story with Green Arrow is Team Arrow is going to go after Professor Ivo. Ivo ties into robotics. It's really cool what's happening, and it's happening at a breakneck speed. And this is why I love crossovers. And I was not excited about this at all. I think Amanda Waller, they need to give her a break. Like, just like Steve, as you had said in conversation, it was like the Batman Who Laughs. It was just so much of it. You gotta, put it on a moratorium. And after this, the movie TV plans are one thing, but in the comics, just give her a rest, because it's too much right now. It's too much.
She's been working overtime. She's been working overtime for the past, I'd say, good 2 years, 2.5 years.
There's been a whole lot of stuff, both in continuity and out. So we need a break, which will tie in perfectly when the Waller's TV series just happens. That they'll have a stack of trades that they can hawk. But so that's where I am with Absolute Power. And Steve, you did read the first issue, I believe.
I did, and kind of going back to what you had said about this feeling like an old, almost like an old-fashioned story idea, where you've got like the mustache twirling supervillain.
It's a very simple concept. It's a very simple concept. Yeah.
All the superheroes no longer have powers. I've stolen your powers. Now what are you going to do?
Magic. Magic's gone.
Magic, or whatever. It's like my new machine, the Power Stealer 2000, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's kind of the basic core concept of this plot. But I think in Wade's hands, and everybody who's contributing to this seems to be presenting it in a way that's exciting.
Yeah.
That gives you those holy shit, these are high stakes kind of moments, especially with John Kent waking. Like when you mentioned that, I was like, holy shit! Like this is not like John Kent's got a couple tubes. This is John Kent's got a couple tubes, a hole in his chest, and he's got some what looks like sort of like Borg circuitry kind of coming up out of his neck and his forehead. So has he been plugged into the Brainiac system, the Lady Brainiac system that Waller's got going? Possibly. I mean, there could be any sorts of plans within plans that are happening, but Superman's been shot.
In the Batman story, you see Superman is in another place in the Death of Superman restorative suit, which is so nice to see. And again, it just ties into the legacy of continuity with and also just a word for Dan Moore. He can draw the fuck out of robots.
He can. And
Dan,
there's
Dan
a lot
Moore
in
can
this.
just draw the fuck out of everything. And when you have somebody like, legitimately speaking, like when you have somebody like Dan Mora, who is both a fast artist, like he can draw two books at the same time, in a way that not many people can, and you put that in the hands of somebody like Mark Waid, who is both. Mark Waid is an enigma, right? Like Mark Waid both is tethered to continuity, probably knows more about DC history than most people, but also can write it in a way that is fresh, that's not stale, which is important, right? And not many, like I love what you said. Like his first published work with DC was in 1984, and yet in 2024 he can write stories that still speak to us, to a different section of the readership, but are still relevant, right? And not many people, not many writers, their career can't span that. Yeah. So you have this combination of just an incredible work ethic, an incredible knowledge base, an incredible artistic skill that just culminates in something fascinating that DC is firing on all cylinders right now, in a way that Marvel is not. And if we're just going to compare big two, like DC has definitely got the upper hand at the moment. And I think they have figured something out. Like they have tapped into something that the readership wants, that their competition has not been able to do so. And they're threading a needle in a really impactful way.
And I also have to say, as somebody who's been lazy or uninterested in staying on top of books, this is ideal for me.
Yeah,
this
man.
is ideal to just jump back in. And
to that point.
And it's just so nice to look at the, when the tie-ins, like what tie-ins do I have ahead of me? Oh, it's Wonder Woman number 11. It's Tom King writing something about this. It's like that kind of stuff. I get like
there's a checklist.
Yeah, checklists are awesome. Crossovers. Awesome.
Well, with this, like what you were saying, like you've been kind of lukewarm. Jumping in on this one, we were talking about with Steve. This is something where I don't know everything that's been going on. I'm sort of like picking up bits and pieces here and there from what's going on in other DC comics. You do not have to do all that back reading before you get into absolute power number 1. You don't even have to read Ground Zero or have read the free.
No. I will. I can tell you that as somebody that's read every page of this. No, you can just. Yeah, I have a feeling that this is going to be a complete story in and of itself. Of course, there's going to be tangential things that will be rewarding from it, but I think Wade's been a writer long enough, and even in the promotional materials, he said he's read every DC superhero story ever. That kind of knowledge behind that, I'm sure he's going to craft something where the main series is rewarded in and of itself.
So Bill, let me ask you a question as the person on the podcast who has not read this, right? When you guys were talking about this the other day, it kind of mirrored what my expectation was, which is very Amanda Waller heavy. And I made the comment on our little behind the scenes group chat that
I don't have the emotional capacity to read a story where it basically, the way that Amanda Waller has been presented lately is like she is a fascist for the greater good, right? And I just do not have the mental wherewithal to read that. Is that a fair assessment, or was that just something that for me I read too much in?
I think it could be a fair assessment, but I think that they address the complications of that kind of portrayal very early on.
Okay.
And like I said, sometimes the breakneck speed aids in quelling certain concerns that you might have about such a representation and that being distasteful to you because of other goings on in the world. I think Wade's with you. Gotcha. In a sense, to the point that she's going to get hers. She's going to get hers.
Well,
the road there is going to be tough, but these are superheroes, and she's not a hero.
And they address the politics question very, very quickly in one page, where they address like, well, the president says whatever. It's like, I don't give a shit what the president says. We're superseding any kind of his like trying to calm down the populace. Nobody in any government has any ability to stop what we're doing right now, even if they wanted to, because obviously, you've got hopefully some kind of level heads in the DC universe here where they're like, this is weird what's happening with what we're seeing with superheroes just blowing shit up. And we know that it's AI related because it apparently becomes very clear.
Yeah. The Flash says more about disinformation in this one panel than you get on 5 weeks on CNN.
Okay.
And much more
just
than
very quick, very easy. Yeah. Like, this is what's happening. This is what people are seeing. And this is all false. Is there a way to counter that narrative?
Is there a counter for some people? Is this not even going to matter? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, cool.
That makes sense. Thank y'all for clarifying that. Because I want to read this because I'm like Bill. I love crossovers. I want to keep up with the continuity, but I just
and plus you really like World's Finest.
I do. I love World's Finest. I love John Kent.
It's a different animal for World's Finest, but it almost also feels like a lot of World's Finest was leading up to this too. Sure, in a sense.
Yeah. Well, and I think it probably was, right. I mean, it's got the same writer, you got the same artist, so I think there's a pathway there. I don't necessarily think I have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity right now to deal with. It's kind of like when
and you know what, man? If you're worried about it, there'll be trades. This will be on the app. Like I said, we started. I turned off the debate 14 seconds before it started. Haven't returned to any political TV. Haven't even been listening to Stephanie Miller. That's how bad it is, and that's. The last time I did that was Trump's election for 2 months. I'm not there right now. I totally get that.
Yeah.
When you're ready, get to it.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah. Cool. It's one of those cases of you do you, boo. But you got options. You got options.
And I appreciate you putting it that way. Like man, there's so much going on. I just do not have the there's so much in fiction right now that's mirroring reality, or at least commenting on reality, and reality is already stranger than fiction. And I'm just like,
it is. Man.
I can't. so I appreciate you putting it that way.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. I don't even know what books you guys are talking about because I was so busy today. Steve has longevity, so we'll start with you, Steve.
Well, thank you. Seniority, whatever.
Baby, it's the time you're top, so go.
Sure. So anyway, we were talking about sort of like 80s storytelling, those kind of auteurs earlier with Steve. And the book that I'm picking takes one of those who I would consider an auteur just by some of the work that he's done when he was working with the Big Two, but then also afterwards in his own independent works, and that is Kurt Busiek with his new book out, Free Agents. And in this one, he also flashback to the 90s. He co-created this with Fabian Nicieza.
Damn it, I forgot about this book. Damn it.
Oh yeah. So and this is I'm going to say right here, Kurt Busiek. This is him being able to be Kurt Busiek, and with Fabian Nicieza in there, both of them know how to write superhero team books. They know how to bring out what we longtime comic readers kind of expect from these are a bunch of superheroes. They have different power sets. This is how they interact with each other. But Kurt especially has this way of bringing out a lot more humanity in those same characters, so that you kind of not only do they have sort of the archetypes that we expect from a team book, especially an Image team book, but there's also a lot more depth to them, and there's a lot more interaction with these characters in the greater world. And I love that, and I love how Kurt Busiek writes these characters. I'm a huge Astro City fan, and this is very different from Astro City, but there's a lot of that sort of DNA that a writer and a creator can bring to that. And I think with him and Fabian Nicieza working together on this, we're getting a lot of that kind of like the fun feel of team books and character books from the late 80s, early 90s that kind of got washed away through all of the crazy speculative stuff that just, everything became about the image rather than like the actual characterization. And here we're getting these very, archetypal characters, but we're getting the characterization, story behind them. And what is the story with this? So basically, we're thrown into the mix here with a group of these, archetypal superheroes. There's a very quick blurb, in single panels that says what their name is and what their power set is. And it's just like, that's all you need to know. Here's a giant action scene with them fighting a big missile slinging mech that's broken into Earth's atmosphere and is in the universe now. These characters are all from a war that's been, raging for years somewhere out in the multiverse, somewhere in some multi-dimensional space where they were fighting the good fight. And now they've somehow escaped, and they're now on Earth as free agents. They're no longer part of any kind of military force. The war is over for them because they're out of it. Except there seem to be little incursions that are happening that are bringing the war to them. There are realities, universes that have been destroyed because of this. And, they thought that they were kind of, out of it. And were able to sort of recreate, create new identities, create a new life for themselves on this Earth that has its own superheroes already. It's got everything on, they don't need us. But unfortunately, it turns out that they do. And, there's a lot of great action. There's a lot of great poses. The artist in this is Stephen Mooney, and he does a really great, I'd say like a great splash page and great action, sequences. And it works really well for this because it does have that feel. There's a very sort of like indie spin on it, but it does have that feel of sort of like a late 80s Big Two, early 90s, start of the Image era of, how these books are expected to look. It's a big book. It's 40
Just
pages.
This little bit that I'm seeing makes me feel like Pre-Morris and Doom Patrol.
There's, some of the characters, and this is where you get Kurt Busiek. So you've got one of the characters that's right there in the middle of the panel on this particular page that I'm showing for those of you who are listening, of sort of like a weird sort of monster type character, a kind of a thing, kind of a Hulk or a Swamp Thing. This character is actually a small boy, like maybe about 12 years old. And he can't control his powers. It's painful for him to transform, and he can't control himself emotionally when that happens. He's almost feral. And there's another character there that's helping him deal with this transformation process and all of that in a lot of the quiet moments of the book. This first action sequence is like maybe the first 10 pages, and then there's a good 20 pages of them interacting in real life as civilians.
Sure.
And trying to get through, just sort of understanding where they are now in this world that they're going to have to call home. But you're seeing the depth. You're seeing like all sorts of these bits and pieces of very complex characters that we don't usually see elsewhere. There's a couple characters that have clearly sort of a FWB, friends with benefits, or fuck buddy relationship going on. That's a little bit weirder because one of them has blood that can heal people, and the other counterpart, she's drunk, she's dancing, she's like, oh man, just give me that juice, I'll be fine, and like ends up cutting him to drink some of the blood. Like, this is just very strange stuff that you don't normally see in this kind of superhero team book. But Basic's really, he's picking some interesting ideas, he's doing some interesting things with these characters, and I'm really excited for the second issue. In the back matter here, he does describe sort of how well, actually, Fabian Nicieza describes how he and Kirk came up with these characters and what they're looking forward to. And it sounds like they're following, almost an old-fashioned trajectory of like, we want to do all these crazy stories. We want to go for, 40, 50 issues. And, we're going to give that kind of storytelling that we really enjoyed, sort of like that exciting, action kind of storytelling, but also with, all of the modern, depth and breadth of storytelling that we've been able to get in the past 40 years since that, or 35 years since that was kind of like the norm, where we can get more, and I like this. I like this concept. It's like, what if we went back in time and the writing was better?
Well, no, I like that. I like that the way you're describing. I haven't read this, but I like the way you're describing it is. It has some connection to the way that Astro City was made, but Astro City was more of a study of like this broad concept, right? And this really dials in on the characters. And for me, like, I love Busiek, right? Busiek and Perez made me a comic fan, like their Avengers thing. That's the reason I'm on this podcast today, and so I'm always gonna love what he has to offer. But I will say that there are some elements of music that he just gets. There's too much of a distance there, and you sold me on this because it doesn't sound like that distance from the reader and the character are really effective in the way that some of the, like Astro City was. And I'm like you, I love Astro City, but some of it was very much voyeuristic. Like, it's like, hey, let's sit over here and let's watch this happen over here, right?
With a scope that big, I think it had to be, though.
Yeah, fair. And I think I think that was necessary. But with this, he's really dialing back into that. And with somebody like Fabian Nicieza, who such a storied history in comics, very good at just like I think of Fabian Nicieza in the same way that I think of Tim Seeley to some degree, right? Like they're kind of that same school and the same mold.
Yeah.
So you very much sold me on this, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that they get to continue on it a lot.
It was funny. I was in a comic shop last week and I saw the Image First, the dollar books.
Yeah.
And they had an Image First for Astro City, which will be on Image, but they also had a dollar version of Aerosmith. And this must be why this was,
which by the way is a fantastic series.
Yeah.
If anybody listening to this, number one, if you just like adventure and dragons and stupid stuff and like World War II analogs, you're gonna love Aerosmith. If you liked Anne McAfee's books, The Dragon Riders of Pern, you're gonna love Aerosmith. So check that out.
All right, cool. Yeah. All right, Caleb, how about you? What do you?
So I am going to be the proverbial which one of these things is not like the other in the group. We've had two really amazing superhero stories presented to us tonight. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm actually going to be talking about a Silver Sprocket book, and this is a Silver Sprocket book called Adversary by Blue Delicanti. Way different than anything Bill and Steve have spoken about. This was actually gifted to me by our dear friend David Price while we were at Heroes Con. And I finally had a chance to read it and was just kind of fascinated by it. I love the storytelling element of it. The story is about this man named Curtis, and Curtis, if you're looking at this image, he's the bear in the background, right? Like he's you know the whole story takes place during the pandemic, during COVID, or just when COVID's dying down, and Curtis is this bear of a man. He's a sweetheart, right? But he's also got a physicality to him. Um, Not his day job, but at least his what he does in the after he gets off work is he participates in self defense classes for women, right? And so he teaches people how to take care of themselves, and uh, he's the one who puts on the cup and the body armor, and he lets the folks beat up on him, and he's the adversary, right? He's the person who tries to mug them or whatever, and teaches women self defense classes. And so our man Curtis is in this world. He's a little bit slightly depressed. He's newly out after living living life, an adult life, as at least from the outside looking in, as a heterosexual man. He comes out as being gay, or at least being queer, and is still navigating that. Not really sure where he fits into the world, and so he frequents a bar, and he's a beer drinker, and he's sitting there, and the waitress comes over and says, "Hey, this individual over there asked me what kind of beer you drink, and they asked me to send this over to you." And he looks over and sees this guy, and he's like, "Well, the guy's kind of cute. Why don't you tell him to bring it over himself?" And so the guy does, and this guy's name is Anton. And Anton comes over, and all of a sudden, Curtis realizes that he recognizes Anton to some degree, and he's like, "I know you from somewhere, right?" And he starts wondering, and Anton's like, "Yeah, no, the reason I sent you the drink over is because I also know you. Like, I took one of your self defense classes." And Curtis is like, "Well, that's not possible, because the only self defense classes I offer are for women." And Anton's like, "Yeah, no, that's true. Um, when I took the class, that's how I identified. I now don't identify that way. Anton is a trans man." And thus begins this relationship with these two people, where they have this sort of BDSM relationship that's based on this very physical, very assault based, self defense based kind of interactions. Obviously, there is a safe word here, right? And I think in one of the images I sent you, Steve, they actually show the safe word. They say clear, but they start this physical relationship based on their history of martial arts and their history of self defense, to where they put themselves in a consensual but seemingly non-consensual assault situation, where Curtis will try to use his physicality, his body, to assault Anton, and Anton fights back, and they fuck, and it is what it is. But it's a safe environment, right? There is a safe word there. They are both on the same page. It is simulated non-consensual interaction, but it is actually consensual. It's simulated non-consensual, and this is presented in a way that shows that these two characters are both a little bit broken, right? They're both a little bit lost. They're both trying to figure out things. They're both newly out. They have this tether to their relationship based in self-defense classes, and what that means. They're both interested in BDSM, and so they go with it, right? They kind of have this assault fantasy situation, which I'm not sure what to do with personally, right? I don't know how that works. I don't know how that's supposed to be interpreted, but it works for them to some degree, right? And they have to deal with this back and forth of one gets closer than the other. One character is trying to process what this means. There is the intersection of where they meet with one another, and what this relationship is doing for one person versus the other. It's fascinating, right? It's a fascinating psychological experiment, it's great storytelling. There's nothing, if you're looking in this, there is nothing in this that is game changing in the art. It's kind of what you expect from Silver Sprocket. Um, it's deceptively simplistic, but it's very expressive. I love the character designs in this, but the real story is in the writing, and just in this juxtaposition of what it means to be in a physical relationship that's predicated on non-consensual interactions, but in a very safe way, and that can be very complicated, right? And I say that as somebody who, you know, very admittedly dabbles in BDSM. Like, I get, have the type of relationship where I get to play around and I get to do certain things, and kind of broach this world, but there's always this like very consensual, safe environment, right? Whereas in this, there's a simulated aspect of it not being safe, and there's a whole trust issue there where they rely on one another to understand where that line is. I'm fascinated by it, right? I love this aspect, and then you also get into this whole aspect of where Anton is a trans man, and Anton is the top in in the relationship. Like, what does that mean? How does that affect their understanding of the situation and the environment, and this exploration um, of identity, and of personhood, and of personal space, and of consent, and of violence, right? And I think that it is a wonderful book. I think it is a very well written, very considerate exploration of all of those factors. That for somebody like me, who also is reading this from the aspect of being a cis man, being gay, but also being bi, for whatever that means, and still trying to figure that out for myself. What those relationships look like appreciating violence and pain and pleasure and all of that stuff. Like, I thought this was a really interesting perspective, and it challenged me as a reader to understand how to broach it. And so I would encourage you all, if you're looking for something challenging, right? If you don't want comfort food, if you want something that is going to be slightly abrasive, to check out, number one, just check out Silver Sprocket in general, right? Because they deliver that in spades. Like, just they deliver that in such a dynamic way. But Blue Delaconte and this book, right? This adversary book, they take it to a new place, and they do it in a way that I think is important. And in a very short manner too. Like, this book is one of those books that, like, it should take you 30 minutes to read and about 14 hours to process, if that makes sense. So
yeah.
So check it out.
We did have Blue on the show to talk about A Human Star, and I think a lot of the things that you said about this resonate with that. That you put it down and you're thinking about it for 4 or 5 times the amount of time it took you to read, with some of the complex topics that they discuss. I believe Blue is them, they.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one thing I'm interested in is what the format of the book is. Is it a novel? Is it?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, it is a graphic novel. I guess that's what you would say. I would say, like, if you had to compare it to publishing terms, it's a novella. Okay. Again, because it is. I mean, it's
no. I just didn't know if it was a collection, or if that was the first issue, because it was. I only was going on the cover, so.
Sure. I got this from our friend Dap, and it is all in one form. $15.99 gets you everything, this full story. Okay. I don't know if Blue has any plans for this afterward or not, because it is very open-ended. But at least this, in the sense of what you're asking, is a complete story. Much like a lot of Silver Sprocket's really good about that. Silver Sprocket sells a lot of novellas.
Yeah.
So that's their kind of bread and butter.
Very unique short form stuff. You can find pretty much anything.
2 books I got to get now. Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one that I also need to pick up, because, again, I love Blue stuff. Human Star was wonderful. I mean, talking about the idea of identity and personal identity and how it changes over time. Obviously, this is very literal, transitioning, but the idea of violence and role play and consensual non-consensuality, that this is all very interesting and kind of new from what I would expect from Blue, but there is that sort of thread of how do I present and how do I understand myself, as a person who's experiencing something that's different, and also is putting on a role that may not be something that they would have seen for themselves. And this sounds very much like that,
and senses of role and self are at the heart of a human star as well, in a very different context.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
it's weird. It's like it's terrain that's been traveled, but in such different manners.
I would love to have Blue back on just so I could experience talking to them, because that's fascinating. But like, one of the things that I love about this is it really is at the heart of, sexuality and gender are two separate things, right? And we've talked about that often. And for somebody like me who, for the most part identifies as a gay man, but I think we've had this conversation on air where there are women that I'm attracted to, right? So there is some sense of bisexuality. So that's a gender thing, but also you have to, like, this book broaches the idea of what about trans men, right? And what does that mean? Because there's a lot of stuff in there, and so as somebody who for me, very admittedly, like I find people attractive more than I find just any kind of framework. Like, Bill loves to joke that Caleb doesn't have a type, and I really don't, right? So what does that mean for somebody like me? And I really appreciated what this book made me think, because think of and like reflect on myself, because there are absolutely trans men that I would have a very intimate relationship with, right? And some of that is I'm attracted to the very physical notion of their body in the way that it is in as I see it, but I'm also attracted to the person that they are, right? And at least in the way that we were trained to think of humans, in my world growing up in the Deep South, that's antithetical to one another, right? Like, this person has a feminine anatomy, therefore they should have a feminine personality. And when you have somebody who's deeply masculine with with at least female anatomy, right? Like, those things don't. And how do you process that? Wonderful time sitting there reading the book and thinking to myself, how what does this say about me? Ultimately, I don't have any answers to that, right? But I appreciate the thought process. I know that I would like to fuck certain people. And that's that just is what it is. And so I really appreciate the very raw honesty that's in this book.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, it's good to see that work out there. Yeah. All right. Well, we are over the 2-hour mark, which is not unexpected given we had an interview and we can talk for all night about books. So, and we all chatted a lot, but we have to start wrapping this show up. The first segment on our journey toward the resolution of an episode is something we call Geek Gets. And Steve, do you have any that you want to show off?
Well, I do want to show off a couple posters here in the background. They are part of DC's Elseworlds promotion that's going on right now over the next several months. They're coming out with a lot more Elseworlds books that are outside of continuity. They're specifically, this is for people who want to read their characters in a very different way. They want to see them in different contexts, different history. It doesn't really, have to affect anything in the main books. But two of them that are being advertised here: Batman the Barbarian, which is a very interesting take on Batman, of course, and then continuation of the Batman Gotham by Gaslight concept. This one called the Kryptonian Age, and the Kryptonian Age did just come out in the past couple of weeks. So I have issue number 1 here. I am looking forward to reading that.
I think I got that. I think I got that too.
Yeah. So So yeah, just have a couple posters there. There's more. Obviously, there's other Elseworlds books coming out all winter, I think, which is a continuation of the Steel Brotherhood of Steel book, not Brotherhood of Steel, but the sort of the medieval DC. Yes, Dark Knights of Steel is coming out as well.
Okay, Caleb, how about you? Do you have any Geek Gets?
I do have Geek Gets. So I want to showcase the shirt I'm wearing, which I picked up at Pride. It's a Tom of Finland shirt. Also picked up in Northwest Arkansas at Pride a very cool Divine hat. And then
nice.
and then shout out to my our friend Ray, also known as Onomar from the EOC community. Manages one of the Amoeba record stores, and recently, in fact, this past week had a event with John Waters hosting. So shout out to him on that. It was kind of weird overlap, but I love it. But also considering our guest, my big geek get goes to this OA, right? This original page.
I was there. Jesus, yeah.
Mine is a page
and Steve did not get art, but he got plenty of bookish.
My man loaded up.
Yeah.
This is from Athena Voltaire and the Isle of Dead. It's page 11 from that. Yeah. Wonderful storytelling, right? And that's, if you know me, like, I'm not gonna. It feels like a cop out to say that I only pick up the storytelling pages, because the money pages are like the things that show the superhero or whatever. But I really do look for story pages that feature that. And I love that page. So shout out to Steve. Thank you for letting me buy that from you. And this goes back to the interview. Thank you for being one of those friends that talks to us so often and then just opens our eyes to the parts of this medium and this business that we would not otherwise understand. And thank you for also placating my weird nerd questions.
I'm just briefly going to show. I also did get an Athena Voltaire page, and this is from the web comic. All the previous, I think this is my third Athena Voltaire page, and the previous two were from Standard Comic in the Standard Comics. The webtoons, with the web comic, it was in this format, in the horizontal format. So I just wanted to show that off briefly. For my Geek Gets, I don't want to talk about my birthday, though I had a birthday, and I did. If you are unfamiliar, my birthday is July 4th, and it sucks. There are fireworks, but none are for you. And
they're all for you, baby.
So I've always had a chip on my shoulder, but I had a nice little Poconos getaway for a couple of days. And so the Frank Frazetta Museum, I should have had some stuff there. And I took care of some Christmas shopping while I was there too. So
nice.
Yeah. But July is the time for sales on home video. The biggest one is Criterion. But I enjoyed the sale that oldies.com had on MVD and what was the other label? MVD and Legend, which are, much smaller than boutique labels like Criterion or Arrow, but put left to center material out there. So for like penny, these were so cheap. I got the Blu-ray of the film adaptation of My Friend Dahmer.
I loved it. It
from Shell's what's his name? Goddamn, Durf. Jesus Christ, Shell. Jesus.
Shel Silverstein.
And this is really well done. Sorry for the light there.
And Dr. Hook.
Yeah. And something that was on a lot of the streaming sites which disappeared, but I was so happy to see this. I got the Elstree 1976 documentary, which is about a lot of the people that had small roles and extras when Star Wars shot in England in 1976. This was on multiple streaming sites, disappeared all of a sudden, but now I can watch it anytime I want. And then the last one, and this was the one riff tracks that I went to see in the movie theater, which was the Plan 9 from Outer Space in color from 2009. So I got that on home video. Very happy about that.
Nice.
And I own them, and I can watch them at any time. I don't have to worry about streaming rights going away. That's the way life should be.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, we're wrapping this one up right now in a bow, and the last segment on the Comic Book Bears podcast is something we call the Woofs of the Week. In the bear community, if you find a fella attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar. We woof at a product, which may be comic book related, but it may also be a TV program or a film or a child initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
Well, I actually changed my woof of the week while we were talking with Steve because he mentioned when he was going through kind of the inspiration, he mentioned talking about EC Comics, the work of Graham Ingalls, and sort of like those kind of creatures and things. And it got me thinking about another documentary that I just watched. I was going to talk about a different documentary, but I'll talk about this one. And that is Just Desserts, The Making of Creepshow, which was a movie back in 1984, 1985. I absolutely loved it when I finally saw it. Probably too young. Excuse me as I sneeze. We'll take that off of the audio version.
That's what you look like when you sneeze.
Yeah, that's exactly what I look like. This is actually Stephen King. If you have never seen the original film, definitely check it out. This documentary, though, really goes in depth, interviews everybody who was involved in the show. It was made back in 2007. So a lot of the people who are interviewed in it are no longer alive. George Romero, of course, is talked about and is interviewed a lot. But I mean, the stories that they can tell about making each one of the segments and the creatures, the zombies, Tom Savini, talking a lot about it, how Stephen King, wrote some of the ideas and why he, wanted to be Geordie, the character who turns into a giant plant man. Great stories about Ted Danson. Adrienne Barbeau is interviewed, and she looks, by the way, still looks amazing.
Yeah.
I
saw her in person a couple of years ago. She still looks great.
Oh yeah,
Really
and she, she of course played the character of Billy, who's this horribly vile person who gets her just desserts in the Creepshow film. But like just listening to her talk about it and how much fun she had and how much she loved working with George Romero and the rest of the crew. I mean, it's a heartwarming documentary. It's great. So I totally recommend it. Just Desserts, The Making of Creepshow. You can see it. I believe it's running on the Roku channel and a couple other services if you can find it. But totally recommend it. If you can get it on DVD, even better. But Just Desserts, The Making of Creepshow.
The segment with E.G. Marshall, the end of it specifically, will till the day I die.
Oh, they talk all about that, where they got all of those the roaches and everything, and it is as disgusting as you can ever imagine. That they talk about it. They're like, this is the worst thing ever.
I remember one time on a rewatch, I just fast forwarded it. Could not get through it on that day. But did they get E.G. Marshall? Was he still alive at that point?
He had sadly passed on. And unfortunately, my middle brother had actually been able to meet E.G. Marshall, and he sat next to him on a plane going to California and got to talk with him and fall asleep on him and drool a little. So, that's
okay.
My E.G. Marshall connection, but I don't think my brother was talking to him about Creepshow because he was too young for that.
All right, cool. Over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your woof of the week?
So my woof of the week is going to go out to a television show, but also to an experience, right? So my woof of the week is actually going to be The Bear Season 3, which my husband and I finished this past week. Fascinating show if you like weird anxiety, it's for you. If you like food, it's for you. If you like just really well written television, it's for you. But more so when I talk about the experience, there was a very interesting moment in this show, right, where an experience meets pop culture in a way that I was not expecting it to. Last year, my husband and I were very fortunate enough to be able to go and eat at Alinea in Chicago, which is a 3 Michelin star restaurant. And if you know The Bear is about a diner in Chicago where the main character comes in and takes over from his brother and takes it from being a diner to being a high-end restaurant, right? To being fine dining. And they do it in a way that you can still go get your Chicago beef, but also you can have your fine dining experiment. But the show really features the fine dining culture, right? It makes you understand why people spend exorbitant amounts of money on this food, where maybe you didn't understand that before. And I love food, right? I'm fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by the experience. I'm fascinated by the element of cooking. And so, one of the things in this show is they show you all these actual real world chefs who own these Michelin star restaurants. And we were sitting there watching it, and all of a sudden, it's not a spoiler, but in the third season, there is a scene where Chef Grant, I don't really know how to pronounce his name. Ashatz shows up. That's the chef from Millennia. And in the scene, the particular scene, he's being interviewed by a person, or at least the person talks to him about the restaurant. And they ask him about these dishes, and both of the dishes were two of the dishes that were served when my husband and I went and ate at Alinea. So we got this really cool experience to where we got to experience this good food, and then we go watch this renowned television show, and we get to see the chef that we actually got to meet. Um, then we got to see in real time, and he talks about his food, and we got to hear him talk about two different dishes that we got to experience on the bear, and that's pretty damn cool, right? Like, because you're getting it's both this experience that you had in person mixed with this pop culture element, and I just found that fascinating. And there's a whole I never expected to be like that person, and I never really understood fine dining until about a couple of years ago, and so now I get it. And it's kind of a weird nerd moment. I'm like, hey, I saw that dude. I ate his food, and now it's on a show with these famous people. And that's pretty damn cool. So go watch season 3 of The Bear. Take a Xanax before you do, because the show is distilled anxiety. That's what it's made to do. It's doing its job. If you feel uncomfortable, that's what it was meant to invoke. So fascinating show, beautiful, very well written, very well acted. I need more of it in my life.
Yeah, and we got
Vince
a
the Nibbler
comment from my
here.
good friend Vince about there being too many family triggers, but I do watch it. You see what Vince's last name is, so
Nibbler.
hitting the insanity there.
Also, still only 35 cents to join us. Hello, fellow comic book folk.
Nice to see
And
you there.
thanks for joining us. We're at the end where we're talking about our wolves, so there may not be comic books. But
also,
yeah.
Vince got me a fantastic birthday gift, and if you're on my Instagram or Facebook, you can see what it is.
Oh,
really
yeah.
great, Vince.
Yay,
But for
Vince.
my wolf of the week, it's something else, and this goes out my wolf to Elvis Costello. Last night at the Mann Music Center, I saw my 43rd Elvis Costello concert since 1986. My first concert was in Philadelphia with Elvis Costello and the Attractions. Last night's concert was in Philadelphia. And because of sickness within his band, he played without his guitarist and his bass player. So it was just Elvis, first aided by keyboardist Steve Naive and then drummer Pete Thomas. Steve and Pete were 2/3 of the Attractions, who were his backing band from 1977 to 86, and then again from 2004 to 2006, roughly. And what I got was basically the closest I'll ever see to the Attractions again, for personal reasons with the other dude. But when the announcement was made that it would be a very different set list because two of the band members could not play because of illness, what I ended up getting was probably his best set list that I've seen in at least 15 years, if not more. And one thing that was problematic, I would say, with the last few times I've seen him is, he's getting older. He's, nearing 70. Voice is starting to go. And it seems to be more prevalent when he's sitting down than when he's standing up. But last night blew my theory. He was in fine voice, very fine voice. And to compound my wolf of the week, if you want to put it to an item, it's a strange atmosphere that we have right now, where some of the best places to get an artist vinyl are attending their concerts. But the only Elvis Costello studio album that I did not have a physical copy because I got like a download with all kinds of extras when it first came out. Was the album Look Now from 2018, but I rectified that last night and now have that on vinyl. So and there's some Elvis Costello albums I have like at least 5 different formats, as we had upgrades, but now it's complete. Now the studio collection at least is complete, and that's my wolf of the week. All right, we see a big yawn from Caleb. You've seen a few from me, so we got to wrap this up. So again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the X and the Blue Sky and the other thing, and the Instagram and the Threads as Comic Book Bears and the other thing. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to listen to us, please do so through Apple Podcasts, through Spotify, and many of the other podcatching platforms. The most successful one, it seems right now, is YouTube Music. That now has the podcast component to it. So we very happy to see new listeners from that. And if you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
If you're listening to the audio version, you're going to hear Woof and Explosion. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Take care, everyone.
Woof.
It's a woof. It's a gur.
Woof.